The protesters won their first victory to camp near Wall Street after a mass clean-up effort was cancelled. What will this do to the mood of the movement? Will it add more impetus?
Well, what's clear, if you monitor this closely, there's some talk that these demonstrations in Wall Street are being encouraged by people trained by the Obama administration or financed by George Soros. In a sense, it doesn't really matter because the spotlight has been put on the source of the problem in the world economy and world finance over the last 4 years, namely a handful of gigantic banks that have simply hijacked the economy and the populations of the world for their own interests. And that to put the spotlight on that, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And what's interesting, this movement is taking on a life of its own. I just talked with Sean Maguire, a journalist friend of mine with the Sovereign Independent in Ireland, and he reports on the enormous groundswell that's taking place in Dublin, demonstrating every day for 3 weeks now against the banks. And the press has finally been forced to acknowledge the existence of the rally and cover it fairly honestly. So this thing is spontaneously bursting out everywhere, and I think it's one of the most encouraging signs that we've had since the crisis broke in 2007.
Just briefly explain your comments earlier about Obama and Soros, the element there.
Well, it's been mooted about that a former member of the Obama White House has been training many of the Wall Street demonstrators in forms of peaceful action against Wall Street in a bid to kind of boost the fortunes of the Democratic Party for the upcoming election. There have been rumors that foundations tied to George Soros and such circles have been financing some of these organizations as a counterweight to the Republican Tea Party movement, which is financed by big oil money of the Koch family and such things like that. In a sense, I don't think it really matters at this point because it's taken on a dynamic of its own, and by putting the focus on Wall Street and 6 to 7 banks, gigantic banks that are simply too big to save, they're not too big to fail anymore, it brings up the question, why haven't we done what the Swedes did in 1992 when the government stepped in, nationalized the bank, drew a ring fence around the problem institutions until they could be sorted out and kept the real economy of Sweden functioning. And that's what has to happen in the US, that's what has to happen in Ireland, that's what has to happen in Portugal and these various other countries, certainly in Greece.
You're talking just briefly about those countries around the world. We know that the protests will be indeed going global on Saturday, with rallies planned in hundreds of cities in the US, Europe, Asia and Africa. But is this really a sign of something big, or could it just fade away?
Well, it can always fade away, but I think the people doing this have to really think what's behind, Occupy Wall Street. It's a nice slogan, but what are you going to do when you have your people inside the banks? They don't know how to run a banking system, most of them. They're firemen, they're working people, secretaries, students, and so forth. But the point is, what is the problem that these banks have caused, and what is the solution to that problem? The previous Bush administration said, we don't nationalize in America, that's a socialist solution. That's rubbish. To nationalize, as the Swedes did and other countries have done, is the only true capitalist solution to a failure, a dysfunction of capitalist institutions. They have to suffer the consequences. Just
finally, you a little earlier were applauding the motives behind this movement. Is there, though, not a danger that it could be hijacked by anarchists?
Oh, I don't think. I think if it were hijacked by anarchists, I would suspect police provocateurs rather than, or FBI or something like that. That's a favorite tactic to try to discredit peaceful and well-meaning opposition. But I think people are becoming a little more sophisticated about some of these age-old tricks. Hijack or not hijack. The point is, the focus has been turned on the real problem and not on these synthetic false problems like the Tea Party movement was trying to, that was a hijack, but now we're getting into some interesting territory, I think.
F. William Engdahl, author and economic researcher, live from Frankfurt. Thanks very much indeed for your thoughts.
Thank you.